Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of This Is Your Captain speaking. Today I have Daniel Nyberg on, who is the VP of Marketing at Paligo. Daniel has quite extensive experience when it comes to marketing operations, marketing technology. So I'm really excited about getting to talk to Daniel today. He's worked as a management consultant at IBM. He's been the head of group marketing at Bisnode. He's also been head of marketing operations and technology at Dun & Bradstreet. And now, as I mentioned before, he has been for the past year and 6 months, a year and a half, the VP of marketing over at Paligo. So really happy to have you on today, Daniel.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Tell us a little bit what you guys at Paligo do.
Yeah, so Paligo is a company in a niche within a niche. So we're in the field of component content management systems. Most marketers know about component or content management systems, like your web CMS, for example, WordPress. But Paligo does component content management. So basically going beyond, the unit of documentation no longer being a document, but rather a topic, which could be something as tiny as a single word. So our audience is technical writer, documentation managers, knowledge managers, etc. That type of audience. But we also delve into insurance, finance, and of course, software being really one of our main customer segments. We allow our users to create, manage, publish, and translate technical documentation, knowledge management, and product documentation. In a nutshell.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks for that. That was a very good description. So do you guys focus then on the mid-market, upper mid-market enterprise space?
Correct. We find that our sweet spot is usually companies with 100 employees and upwards. There seems to be a sort of an upper ceiling for the size of customers we can get. But that being said, we do have customers like Allianz and 3M in our portfolio.
Interesting. It's hard to really say. So first of all, it's hard to sell into the enterprise space no matter what you're doing. So even if it's low tier enterprise, upper tier enterprise, the issue with enterprise typically is they want customization, and your platform needs to be super customizable. Now, I'm not saying that you guys aren't, but I think the level of customizability, that's not a word, but you know what I mean? The level of which you can customize your product is highly dependent then on that enterprise company. So, and the amount of resource and energy that needs to go into making sure that's customizable is sometimes actually not worth it. And you find as well, especially if I've seen this quite a bit with e-commerce brands, if they're very large scale enterprise, let's take, for example, the Zalandos of this world. Yeah. Instead of them going and investing in a tool, they'll build their own, right? So
exactly. And
I'd
say that you almost define one of our sort of most current challenges at this company. And we're in a position where we grow and we're sort of reaching almost 500 customers. We're 120 employees, and a multitude of our really large customers are pushing that level of customization with us, and we're finding that balance between how much do you customize for your largest customers versus how many sort of wide audience features do you develop for your sort of average regular customers. That balance is something that's a very, very current challenge with us right now.
For sure. And it's a tough market as well, that CMS space. Like you mentioned that you're a niche within the niche, but the CMS category, let's call it a category, is very heavy with companies. Like there's a massive amount of organizations, and there's a lot of amount of organizations that are going after that mid-market role, right? Whereas up at the top for the enterprise, you do have, it's less crowded, let's say, but that would be a similar state to marketing automation for B2C, for example, as well, like the Emarsises, the Bloomreaches of this world, and the Adobes, the Salesforce marketing clouds, all of those things, like they are like the clunky, enormous enterprise platforms. And then right below them that are all trying to conquer the mid-market to lower tier enterprises, like 1,000 companies, right? And CMS is pretty stacked there as well, I'd say. Like you have other companies in your space, like Storyblock, for example, who have just received a lot of funding that are growing.
Or rather, companies like Storyblock trying to cannibalize on what would be Paligo's niche. Like a company like Storyblock would like to position themselves as a component content management, whilst they're actually solving the problems of a regular CMS. maybe using headless, which to some customers or potential customers is also confusing, because the way Storyblock and Sanity, for example, position their product is something that looks very similar to how Paligo positions the product, but the use cases we solve are completely different. And that's one of the, literally one of my main challenges as a marketer at Paligo. Like, how do we educate our potential customers and what component content management is versus headless or API based content management systems? Very challenging. Plus the fact that most of the buyers in this space will say, "Oh, it's a CMS, I'm going to go buy it," and the reference group or internal users might have a different angle, but it's not always they're able to articulate their needs in a way where they would lean towards the CCMS or the Paligo, or like our competitors would be Hereto or RWS with Tridion Docs, for example. So it's that's also another challenge that I'm continuously striking or working on.
So that buyer that you just described, that's like me, right? Like, I would just say that I need a CMS. You just go get a CMS. So how are you? Let's talk about that challenge, because I think that's an interesting challenge across a lot of different industries, especially as you said, if you're going after a niche within a niche, right? I also have a direct experience in that in the CDP space, so customer data platforms. In customer data platforms that offer execution, right? And there are certain ones that do certain levels of execution. There were certain ones that started with execution and then brought in the CDP play afterwards, right? And they're a bit clunkier because the customer data and the execution channels aren't well connected, etc. Right? It's always like this, like, what do we communicate to customers? Like, a customer will come and say, "Hey, I need email marketing." And you're like, "No, you need you need the CDP and push notifications, and you need SMS and blah blah. And it's really an education piece, because really I think there's a disconnect between probably what these companies are offering. Now, you may not be in this space, you may not have the same issue, but what I find is there's a disconnect between what companies think customers need, right? Yes. And versus what the customers actually need. So a simple analogy would be, what the customer is looking for is a drawing of a sunset by a 5-year-old, but actually what the vendors are trying to provide them is a Da Vinci, right? And they're like, I don't need that. Why are you giving me that? So how are you breaking through the noise in your space to try to educate the customer and also fill that gap between what you can offer and what the customer needs?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, right? For marketing.
Exactly.
And to be honest, there's multiple ways of attacking it. Tactically, we do use a lot of video these days. We've been really sort of producing video that on a very high level, very briefly explains the main capabilities of the product. And then at the same time, we also build really, really long in-depth learning videos and really long demo videos, like 45 minutes plus, of somebody really explaining in depth what our product do, and the different or various capabilities within the product. I think that's one way of doing it, self-serving, allowing customers who find us, who find our site, who find our content, to sort of just self-educate them on what we do and find that match of their use case towards our product. That way we can sort of sift the customers that actually have a good fit in the end, after some nurturing and proper looking at videos. But then there's the other aspect of how do you educate the market? And I think in my mind, that's demand generation activities. It's about the brand, what questions will our potential customers ask themselves to figure out a way of taking away the pain they're experiencing. We do get a lot of customer requests or potential prospects. They're coming in with us and say, I need a documentation tool. And that's something that could very well end up being a CMS. That could be Sanity or Storyblock, because you can do documentation with them, right? But if it's documentation tool where they have multiple languages, multiple product lines, distributed environments of authors, and it's a really large company, and multiple points of publishing. They have a website, a help site, PDFs, in-app help, etc. Then it's a different story. That's a CCMS that you need. You don't just build one single document. You need multiple topics that can be built into numerous publications that can be consumed where it's needed. So that sort of education is done for us right now in the form of blog posts and in-depth articles, webinars, really sort of trying to pull apart different, what's a CMS, what's a CCMS, what's a headless CMS, and basically putting that content in front of our prospects. So that's the way we're doing it right now. Remind
me of what a CCMS is. Just CCMS. What does the C stand for?
So C is the component content management. Yeah.
Got it. Component CMS. Okay, yeah. Sorry, you said it at the start. You said it at the top, and I didn't write it down. My apologies. But I've got a couple of questions for you.
Like I said, we are a niche within a niche, and
sure.
And like just dig into that previous discussion a bit more. I think many vendors, software vendors today, believe. I mean, we are super familiar with our niche. We talk about CCMS and components and publishing components every day in my company. And to us, it's super normal. But when we go out and meet our users, they've never heard about this niche, or barely even they've heard about component or content management. So, and that bridging that gap is a huge challenge for a marketer.
Sure. And I see it every day. You hear this from many spots. You hear this from investors quite often. So I don't know if you're VC backed, but you hear it from most VCs. Oh, you need to go and just create a category, right? So like basically what you're doing there is, and I've heard this as well before with the CDP play. I've seen it like, we're a CDEP. We're a customer data experience platform. We're a CDXP, a customer data experience platform as well, but just with an E instead of an X. And we're going to go create that category. And I'm like, I say to founders, and I also say to investors, like, how? Right? That's the challenging part. That's the part that you're going after as well. Is like, let's put all the letters and abbreviations to one side. Yeah. Right? Let's talk about like what we're trying to solve. And I'd also say, okay, what are we comparable to of an existing category? So like, yes, I know that you're trying to put an extra letter ahead of something to make it stand out from the competition, but actually people don't even know what that is. And I've come across that problem in two organizations, in the CDP, CDXP, CDEP. And like, we're a CDEP. And everyone's like, great, what the hell's a CDEP? Like you go out to the customers and you'd say, okay, well, what we need to do is try to create that category by going after G2, for example, or Capterra, and trying to get them to invent those categories. And they're like, no, we already have a CDP category and we have a marketing automation category. So why would we create a CDEP category? You're like,
I actually did that. I joined the company just not a year and a half, like a year or 4 months ago. And my first 6 months was really just banging our head on G2 and Trust Radius and getting them to define. They had sort of defined our category, but not in a way where we liked it. And to be honest, like, it's still not defined fully properly the way we would like it to be. And once that's done, we went after LinkedIn. Here's our category. See here, G2 and Trust Radius, they're doing it. They know what the CCMS is. LinkedIn, please, can you also sort of, define this category within yourselves? And then, then you go on and on and on to Capterra and all the others. So I've sort of been on that journey as well. Very interesting. You have to put that first spin, get that first definition with a recognized review site or others vendor, and then you can take that and bring it to all the others.
That's nice. And that also then, as you said, that first spin, that can then lead you down towards, especially if you're working in the upper mid-market to enterprise space, you go after analyst firms, so the likes of Forrester and Gartner. start to put them under pressure as well. Right. The others are talking about it because they're also coming under pressure from review sites. They may not admit to it, but they definitely are. Right.
They should, right? They should.
Yeah. I fully agree. But hey, look, we've spoken about category management. We've spoken about so many different things. Actually, tell us a little bit about your tech setup over at Paligo.
Yeah. Okay. So tech setup at Paligo is vastly different to what I've experienced in the past. Our tech setup is very straightforward. It's as simple and easy to work with as you would imagine it. We have HubSpot as our CRM, as our sales tool, and as our marketing tool. We have WordPress for driving our website, of course, combined with our own product, Paligo, to run our documentation site on our paligo.net/docs. And we do run Google Ads, LinkedIn Campaign Manager, SEMrush, and a bit of Search Console, and lately actually looking into Bing Webmaster Tools, which is kind of a new experience as well to me. We do see, on a different note, a change in organic search leads coming in from an organic search. Bing is suddenly making some noise, and Google is slightly declining. Not a pivot in any way, but it's suddenly there. It's in the data.
Since when are you seeing the drop in Google, by the way, just out of interest?
Past 3 to 4 months.
Good to know.
Could have a hypothesis on that it's ChatGPT being integrated to Bing, driving that change, and Google not really having a full-blown generative AI search engine on their sort of offering to users.
Which they've started. So I spoke with an SEO specialist yesterday about this. Funny that you mentioned it. And the generative AI piece that Google are rolling out, what's it called again?
Bard.
Bard. Yeah, exactly. They started rolling that out in a number of countries. Like, it's not everywhere and it's not all across the English-speaking world, but they started rolling that out, I think, if I remember correctly, in Mayish. Across like just small rollouts, individual countries, and see how that goes. And on top of that, Google did an update, an unofficial update, just so you know, unofficial update, because they're always a bit unofficial, but they haven't mentioned anything about this. But an unofficial update they rolled out around, I think it was the 16th of July. So Google's a bit all over the place. This is like a Google summer phenomenon. So like I used to work in spaces where I was really dependent on Google traffic in a volume SaaS play. And if your traffic goes down, your sales go down, basically. If you were selling an enterprise, it's a different story. But Google tend to do that. And I think it's a mix of what you said there about bringing in the generative AI piece, and that being very helpful. And Google also doing a ton of updates over the past 4 months that they've been a bit, I would just do this behind closed doors. I'd anticipate Google to take a spring back up again. If it doesn't, people are going to be pissed. So I'm seeing it across many businesses at the moment. Okay, but it's interesting that you mentioned that. Just a tip, just keep an eye on that. That's just me. Just what I'm seeing from others, So
it's really something that coming back from vacation 3 weeks ago, it's something that really, like, it's I check in on this every day, basically. Like how are things developing? Google versus Bing versus DuckDuckGo, for example, is also suddenly having a bit of an impact on our high intent leads coming in. But it's all very interesting. But like I said, the tech setup at Paligo is just what you would expect from a company this size. It's very straightforward, and in my having worked in these very large companies in the past with 13 instances of different CRMs across every single market, Marketo on top of that, 1 or 2, 3 CMSs, and a tech stack, a couple of spreadsheet pages long. It's very simple. It's really wonderful sometimes to have all your data in one place in HubSpot, to do reporting on marketing, on leads, on deals, on revenue. and just sort of blend that in one single dashboard. It's not super granular in HubSpot. There's a lot of limitations when you start drilling down, not super easy. And sometimes it tend to break, but it's very pleasant for me as a marketer to say, okay, paid search, this amount of leads, that amount of deals, that amount of revenue. Very, very comfortable. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think HubSpot's an interesting one, right? Because I think the issue early on with HubSpot was that they still do this, but I think it was a real issue for them early on, that they tried to solve a lot of needs in an SMB space, right? So they tried to offer everything. They tried to have the whole package that other companies would have, and some of the functions were sort of built being like, oh shit, we need to build this function real quick. Like, for example, reporting. So when reporting from HubSpot first was launched, it was a disaster. Like 2015-ish, 2015, 2016-ish, absolute nightmare. The only reason they introduced it originally was because I've read this somewhere. It was in Dan Lyons' book, so don't blame me, blame Dan Lyons. So it was in his book where he mentioned that the only reason they actually developed the reporting feature was because they were hoping to be bought out by Salesforce. And that's why the integration between HubSpot and Salesforce is so foolproof, right? They're so out of box, and it has been from day one, right? They were hoping for that, and then they were like, oh shoot, this isn't going to happen. And then people were like, well, we need to have a reporting function because we can't compete with Salesforce, right? So then they were like, oh no, okay, so now we need to go scramble and create our own reporting function, which essentially didn't work. Like, it didn't work. It would like, you'd run one.
And you can still see the remnants probably of that first function, like in your sort of one-dimensional contact or deals report. And it's like, this doesn't tell me anything.
Exactly. But early on, it was like there was that, plus there was the issue, like you'd run a report, you click run report, which would give you, for example, give me all leads that requested a demo between the 1st of August and the 10th of August. Passed, right? Press run. It would give you 10. Then you go refresh, and it would give you back 5. And you're like, sorry, like either there's 10 or there's 5. Like what are we dealing with here, you know? And actually, the truth, we'd be able to extract that truth from Salesforce then, right? Yeah. And it'd be like 20 from Salesforce. You're like, okay, where are we at, you know? But no, super interesting. And also, like you mentioned, Marketo, etc. Like, like, and I'm wary of time now as well. But just before we finish up, having rolled out like monster tools like Marketo, I've used Marketo as well. Very powerful, but also a challenge, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's so many differences, but to be just for the sake of transparency, Paligo is actually my first operational run-in with HubSpot. I've never I worked with HubSpot, but I've never done it on a daily basis, developing operational functions or features in HubSpot. And it is a delight to work with. But then again, I have the luxury of having only English. I have a single site. I work in an integrated revenue team. Sales and marketing is actually in the same reporting line at Paligo, and everything is super well aligned here. But working at a larger company, like Bisnode or Nunn & Bradstreet, where you have multiple language sites, 12, 15 languages, and you need to. Some of them are EU, some of them are not. You need to hold this sort of GDPR data insulation, databases cannot intermingle, and there's so many more factors and dimensions to take into account. Marketo is a monster, like literally in all aspects. It's much stronger, much faster, much more powerful, but also clunkier and uglier than HubSpot, which is much smoother, more like HubSpot is really like a cat compared to Godzilla, kind of. It's that size of difference. But working in HubSpot is also there's a certain delight to it. Like it's very easy, very intuitive. You can onboard somebody and they will know how to run it in a few days. Well, Marketo had a learning curve of at least 2 to 3 weeks, and ideally a certification or 2 before people came really good. So it's really 2 different worlds.
It's super interesting. Having used both myself as well, as you hit the nail on the head. Like Marketo you're able to extract so much more power, or you're able to exert so much more power using it. But it involves much more manpower, right? A lot more headspace is needed for that as well, because you then need to, as you said, upskill and train properly. Whereas HubSpot has been created for the masses, you know, so that everybody can use marketing automation to a certain respect, and everybody's able to run some form of report. It's like getting your hand held all the way through the experience, right? Which is great on one hand. On the other hand, if you're very, like yourself, if you're very clued into how to use these platforms and the value that you can extract from them, sometimes it's a bit like, come on, I just need to get this, you know. It's like, how difficult can it be? And you're on the phone to support, and you feel like you know more than the support does, and you're like, you know, I get it. I get it. Yeah. But hey, look, Daniel, look, we've just come up on time now. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Where can people find you, Daniel?
So they can find me on LinkedIn under Daniel Nyberg, or they can find me using Paligo or paligo.net. But mostly LinkedIn is the easiest way. Perfect.
We'll put all your details in the description. And thank you so much again, Daniel. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Sure. It's been fun.
Sure. Guys, this has been another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Tune in again next week for more great content. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Andy.